Hi everyone, it's me, Tim. Today I want to talk about, does more dev time mean a better game? This is a question from T4NU1 who asked, "Hey Tim, there's been a myth going around for ages that more development time equals a better product. Is that myth true? Also, what can't be fixed with more development time?" Yes, this ancient myth about more development time. I believe it's from Mesopotamia, 6 or 8 thousand years ago. But before I talk, I should read a book. These are difficult questions. I'm going to take each one separately, but they kind of lead into each other. First of all, does more development time lead to a better game? Does it mean you're going to get a better game out of it? Yes and no. Yes, in the sense that there are a lot of games out there that ship way too early, and then they fail because their features aren't finished. They're incomplete. There's a lot of bugs, especially crash bugs. It's unoptimized, and I mean, there are literally people who are like, this game went below 30 frames per second. I can't play it. So all three of those things, unfinished features, bugs, not just crash bugs, but bugs, and lack of optimization, will make people not buy your game. And I'll talk about that at the end, about what you can do about that. But I'll tell you right now, I will put all of Troika's games into this category. I've said before, I feel like we shipped all three of Troika's games in the alpha stage. If you're wondering what I mean by that, I have a game production stage video. I'll link it below. I was always jealous. For my entire career, I've been jealous of people who work at companies that have war chests. And by war chest, I mean they have a lot of money, probably from previous successful games. And they could basically fund their games themselves until they were until they were done, until they thought, the developers themselves, said this game is done. Unlike most of the rest of us, where we are beholden to publishers who basically, at some point, usually when the money runs out or shortly thereafter, they just pull the ripcord and game goes up on the shelves. And many times I think they figure, well, if this one doesn't do well, we're a publisher, we've got a dozen others coming out. It may hurt our reputation a little, but it'll probably hurt the developer's reputation more. So hope they crunch to get as many of those bugs out. And that's why that happens. However, I want to do the flip side. No, sometimes longer development time doesn't lead to a better game. There are games that have had really, really, really long development times, and they still fail when they ship. And you may ask yourself, okay, why is that? Why does that happen? Because this leads into the OP's other question, which was, what can't be fixed with more development time? And I think there's three categories of things. The first one is bad design. Now keep in mind, I'm using bad in the same sense that I say bad video games, and there's a link to it below. There is no objective bad design. There are designs you don't like, and there are designs that can lead to problems, and there are designs that are really niche. But what I'm talking about is how a design could lead to a game that even additional time spent on development won't fix their issues. And I see, in this first of the 30 categories, I see three subcategories of what I'm going to call bad design. The first one is the design is incomplete. And it can be incomplete in a lot of different ways. It may have an incomplete story. There's a hole in the story where you're playing along and something should be explained, or there should have been something you did here and they ran out of time, so it just jumps you forward to some other mission. Or the ending feels rushed. You've probably played a lot of games like that, where all of a sudden the last few levels don't look as nice as those first starting levels, and you feel rushed right into some kind of end boss, and then boom, game over. Also, a sign of an incomplete design, and I've talked about this before, is if it's possible for you to make a player build that can finish the game. Maybe somewhere along the line you have to have a decent lockpick, or you have to have a decent speech skill, or your combat better be a certain amount, or you're not going to withstand overland travel. Games like this I consider to be incomplete designs. And then finally, there may be unbalanced skills in the design. And by unbalanced, I don't mean that, well, it's better to take these than this. I mean so unbalanced that you can't finish unless you have one or two of those skills that are really good. Or if you only take the really bad skills, again, you can't finish. So it's kind of related to the player build one, but it's specific to skills. They haven't gone through all their quest paths and made sure that people with varying kinds of skills can get through them. That's an incomplete game design, and that can lead to a bad sales. And if you don't recognize that your game design is incomplete, all the development time in the world isn't going to help you. Now back up to the the other two issues with bad game design. One of them is what I call mismatched features, where you have well implemented features, but at the design level, they don't fit in your game. A good example of this would be spending a lot of time to put parkour in a game that has flying. It's like, why would I choose to climb when I can just fly? So you end up with features that don't really belong in there, and short of cutting them out, if you don't recognize they should be cut, all the time in the world isn't going to make these two features mash together well. Other examples may be you have crafting in a game where it makes sense that the best items are dropped or purchased. So why do you have crafting again? Or maybe you have crafting in games that doesn't even make sense. Maybe it's the far future and everything is constructed in nano factories, with tiny little components. It doesn't make sense that I could walk up to a workbench and go bam, 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 look, I made a new laser pistol. If you design your technology, so it's big and clunky, and people can go, okay, that makes sense. I can see why I can work on that big laser gun. But if it's tiny little stuff, it may just not make sense, and it causes this dissonance. Why do you even have crafting in a game like that? And then the third way I think a bad design can hurt you, no matter how much time you're given, is if you're just trend following. Basically, I've seen games that do this where while they're making it, some new feature comes out, and now they have to have that. Or they see that some features become no longer trendy, and now they want to remove it. The more time you give them, the more this will just happen. And then worse, if once they do ship, if they do eventually ship, it may be the case that whatever trend they decided to follow, gamers have seen a lot of games with this already. And maybe you did it good and they're just worn out, or maybe you didn't do it as well as these other games. So gamers are like, why should I play this when I can play this? So trend following frequently leads to games that come out and lead to gamers just going, eh. So that's a problem. I think there's two other non-design reasons why getting extra time won't help you. The first one is there's a couple production ways it can happen. One is if your team skill set doesn't match the game features you've designed. Let's say you want to make a combat-heavy game, but you don't have really good combat designers. Or let's say you want to make a game that's supposed to be in the dark because it's supposed to be scary and horror, but you have really not skilled lighting individuals for the levels. So you either end up with pitch black levels or levels where like, why is this sewer lit up as bright as the sun? It's not saying they're bad game developers. It's just what they're good at isn't what you designed. If you try to make a story game and you don't have any writers on staff, it's not going to be a good story game. That kind of thing. And then the other production issue that frequently creeps in is just bad estimates. I have a whole video on time estimation and ways that can go wrong. But basically, if people have already given you bad estimates, then if you're trying to finish up and you haven't corrected for those bad estimates, you're just going to get another round of bad estimates, and that extra time is not going to help you. Especially if you didn't recognize that the reason some of these are bad is that your features are just mismatched. So you work really hard to get one feature working, and then they complain about another one. You work really hard to get that one working right, and then they complain about the first one again because those features are at odds. You're just wasting time. You're just going in circles. And then the third reason I think, third category of why extra development time won't help you is discoverability. I have a video, and I'll link it below, on discoverability and why it's becoming a bigger and bigger issue. It basically is there's too many games out there, and it's hard to find yours. So giving you all the development time in the world won't necessarily make your game more discoverable, especially if the money that you spent on that extra development time came out of your marketing budget. Because that's the truth. When there's 25,000 games coming out a year, you kind of need a good marketing budget. You need some way of letting gamers know, hey, have you heard of my game? You might like it. So, like I said, all the extra game development time in the world won't help your game get discovered, because those are completely orthogonal things. So, I hope that answers the question, but let me just give this recommendation to you. If this happens to you, you got your extra time, game shipped and it didn't sell, watch my video, I'll link it below, on what to do when your game doesn't sell. Because I've had to do that myself several times. So if there's one thing I'm kind of an expert on is what steps you take after your game doesn't sell well. Anyway, I hope that answered your question, T4 and U1.